Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd and this is my review of episode 11 of season 4 of Star Trek Discovery called Rosetta. I guess after the Rosetta Stone, which as was explained in the episode was used to decipher the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. And in this episode, they're trying to figure out species 10C or Tennessee from a cultural viewpoint before they make first contact with them. And I joked before how for multiple episodes in a row now, they're only planning to make first contact with that species and not just doing it. So I guess in the previous episode, they kind of explained it that they simply couldn't sport jump right to their location and they had to go through the barrier and all of that, so at least it explains all the previous times that they couldn't just go right there, but now they're past the barrier and yet they still don't just go to that species. They're afraid they would not be understood, that maybe the universal translator wouldn't work with them, even though it worked fine for millions of species in the Milky Way galaxy for centuries. It was never such a big deal, but now I guess they cannot risk it not working, so they want to learn something about that species before making contact with them. And so they find their original home planet before they moved into the hyperfield, which they never really explained what is that hyperfield. They just show the hologram of what looks like a giant bubble in space. So I guess it's probably like a Dyson sphere and they live inside of it for protection and probably using the omega particles for an infinite power source, and that's why they send the DMA to harvest the material they need for it. And so I guess it's a cool idea if they actually show it eventually. It's been so many episodes, I'm just waiting and waiting. The pacing is so terrible in this season. This giant mystery box they've been building up for the whole season, if it turns out to be empty in the end and maybe that whole species have been dead and it's all on autopilot now, that would be hilarious if we never actually got to see them. I guess they probably will show them in the very end of the season, in the last episode probably. So for the whole season they're just looking for them. Now they're planning to make first contact, but they need cultural context to be able to talk with them. So they have to first stop at this old planet on which they used to live on, and they say the planet used to be a gas giant and they somehow lived in its atmosphere, which they say is unusual, and we also get to see some of their bones and they look like giants basically. So I am kind of curious to see how they will look like in the end, if they ever show them. I guess maybe they never will, that will be funny. So anyway, they say that the planet's atmosphere was destroyed because it got hit by some asteroids, and that's why it became unlivable, and so that species had to go live somewhere else, and that's where they built the hyperfield. And it's annoying that they never mentioned the Dyson sphere that was found inside of the Milky Way, which we saw in TNG episode Relics, but it was never mentioned again since, so that's kind of annoying. I would have liked if there was some kind of reference to it, because this episode was the only other time we see any kind of mention of this idea. So we actually see Dyson rings around the same star as this old planet that was destroyed. So I guess maybe those rings were simply used for power generation and did not have the ability to support their living conditions. If they lived inside a gas giant, that means they have to have a lot of air pressure, I guess, and so maybe those rings were not able to provide it. Maybe they cannot live so close to the sun because that's not how they used to live, like inside the dense atmosphere, and so maybe that's why they needed that hyperfield. I guess we'll see in the last episode of the season how they really look like, because when they go down to this planet we only see their bones and they do look like giant creatures, so I'm kind of curious to see how they look like. And I would actually praise this episode visually, because the way that their suits look and that environment looks like they see the remains of that civilization. A lot of the scenes in this episode actually look really good visually and even interesting in a science fiction way. The fact that these aliens are not the typical humanoid aliens, that in fact there's something totally bizarre and strange that we didn't see that much of. That's something I always said I wish I would have seen more in Star Trek, more exotic aliens. And apparently they all died when their atmosphere was destroyed, and they discovered that they were protecting their children. Their young were in a special nursery which was extra protected and all of that, and so they're so relieved to hear that, because that means that species Tennessee values life, and that means they do have a shared cultural context. And that's kind of silly, because wouldn't all life forms have that? Like a life form, a civilization wouldn't have got to where it is if not for that trait of protecting the young, protecting the next generation. If you wouldn't be doing that, you wouldn't survive in the long term. And so obviously any civilization which became spacefaring would have those traits of protecting the young, assuming they have a similar kind of evolution as we do, that they produce children at all. So obviously that would be a shared universal trait, and so why are they so surprised by that? And they're so relieved because that means they can now talk with that species. I guess they did learn that that species communicates using pheromones, using smell, I guess. Maybe because they lived in such a dense atmospheric environment, maybe it makes sense. I'm waiting to see how they'll do it in the last episode. Will we finally see something unique and interesting that we never saw before in any other Star Trek show? I am hoping that that will be the case. I am hoping it will be done well. I do think it will be done well visually because, again, this is one of the high points of the episode that I actually did like a lot of the scenes on the planet from a visual point of view. I didn't like how they all started hallucinating and all of that because that is something we saw a million times before and I'm kind of tired of it. When they are down on the planet and suddenly Saru starts feeling fear again, which he didn't feel for a long while. He senses the coming of death, and then the rest of them also start feeling that, and at first only Detmer seems to be immune from it, and she's not reacting to the way others are reacting, and I immediately thought it must be thanks to her brain implant, because from the start of the show, after she got injured in the first episode, she has this strange implant at the side of her head, and one of her eyes is artificial, and it's funny that even now in the 32nd century, she's still unable to fix it, like she cannot fix her face to look normal. I guess maybe she doesn't want to look normal, because it looks cool maybe in that time period, so whatever. But I immediately thought that must be the reason. Maybe something is affecting their brain, and because her brain is augmented, that must be the reason that she is immune and protected. But then, no, it's just a coincidence because she just didn't touch the dust that they touched earlier. Like, they touched some blue dust on the planet, and it caused them to have these hallucinations and the feeling of fear and all of that. And it turns out it's because it's some unknown substance, and that's why their suits are not filtering it out. And that makes me facepalm really hard because what do you mean filter out? Are you telling me that the suits are not providing artificial conditions inside of it in complete isolation? Are you telling me they're actually filtering the air that is outside of it? Why? Why is that necessary when even centuries before this season they already had the technology to have the complete airtight space suits? Like the Red Angel suit was centuries old from the point of view of this season. So if they could do that back then, why cannot they have suits now that simply provide you with everything you need with complete isolation from the outside? Why would you need to filter anything from outside into the suit? Like even earlier in this season when Michael was ejected into space and she was immediately engulfed by a space suit and then flew around in space, similar to the Red Angel. So obviously they do have those kinds of space suits which can give you its own air and all of that, and they have those mobile replicator bags now. You know, Tilly used one earlier to pull out a rope out of nowhere, so they have all these mobile replicators in their suits and all of that. So why the hell would they need to filter anything from outside the suit into the suit? So that was kind of stupid. So they say the suits didn't filter it out because it didn't recognize it. So what a stupid idea of a space suit when you go out to explore the unknown, that the suit will be unable to filter out some unknown substance, even though why wouldn't you simply make the suit totally impenetrable and totally isolated with its own internal life support? Wouldn't that make much more sense? So that really annoyed me. They could have just said that this is some nanomaterial that is simply so tiny that it can get through the suit, that it's made of nanites or something. Simply invent some kind of excuse for why it happened without that silly idea that the suits can actually filter them, but they simply didn't know how. So they adjust the suits and then it stops. And then later on when they get to the nursery, Michael deliberately makes it possible again to feel that material, that new material, and then she feels love and happiness because it's the nursery, and that's how they learn that those aliens actually like their young and they protect their young, even though again that's kind of obvious that any species would be that way if it survived so long in its evolution. And then they all turn off their filters and they all touch that dust to get high of those pheromones. And so all of them, every single one of them, turns off their filtering system and starts touching that dust, and they all look as if they get high off of it. And they say, oh, it's the feeling of love. I feel like when I was with my parents. And then Detmer tells a sad backstory, and then it really made me laugh because I previously pointed out how in almost every episode one of the characters suddenly out of nowhere has to have a scene revealing their tragic backstory. And so now Detmer suddenly reveals out of nowhere that when she was very young her father was really sick and died and all of that. and once again a sob story of a tragic backstory once again. And so that kind of made me laugh. This is supposed to be emotional and sad, but it actually makes me laugh because it became like a pattern. It happens all the time now, so that actually made me laugh out loud. And also the fact that they all deliberately turn off their filters to get high off of that dust, that's really hilarious. Like, why not at least one of them stay sealed completely, not to get high, simply just in case, you're on a mission to save the entire galaxy and all of that. Why are you doing such stupid things like deliberately turning off your filtering system, which now you know how to work, but you still turn it off because you want to get high off of that dust? So that's really absurd. That was really kind of stupid. Like, if one of them did that, I would be fine with it, but not all of them. So all of them, they physically show us as if they get high off of drugs in that scene, and it's a good thing. It's such happiness to get off on that material. So that's basically all they learn in this episode. That dust, those pheromones that was left over by that species, is how they communicate. Apparently, it contains their feelings. The species of Tennessee communicate using their feelings, not using words, not using math, none of that. They communicate through feelings. So I'm really curious how they will do it in the last episode. Will Michael cry really hard to them to convince them to stop attacking the Milky Way galaxy? She'll communicate through her feelings. She will tell them really powerfully through her tears, please stop attacking the Milky Way. That's how it will end. So it's really kind of absurd and hilarious. But at least some of those scenes looked good visually. And meanwhile, on the ship, Book and Tarka are now able to sneak onto the Discovery. So they cloak their ship and they land it right on the hull of the ship. They attach it to the hull, just like in Star Wars, and then they sneak into the ship. And then we see Jet Reno using a replicator, and it makes today's microwave sound, just like in Star Trek Picard. They made fun of that, how the replicator seems so silly, and they make the sound of a microwave of today. And so it's still the case in the 32nd century. What's the reason for that pink song in the microwave? So you'll know when it's ready, right? So you put something in the heater, you go away, and you want to know when to come back. So that's why it makes that sound. Why would you need that when it makes it in a second? Like, if you want something, it replicates it immediately. Why would you need for that sound to let you know when it finishes, if it's finished in a second? Like, it makes no sense. It's silly, it's annoying. At least in Picard I could have said, okay, it takes a few seconds to replicate something, okay, but now it appears in a microsecond. Why would you need the ping to let you know when it finishes replicating? So this was immediately annoying to me. And we also have scenes of they, them, what's her name, Adira, who became absolutely obnoxious. And I don't get it. Like, I actually liked her when she first appeared on the show. I was afraid that she'll be what she's now in season 4. That's what I was afraid of when I first heard about that character. But when she actually appeared, I actually liked her, especially in her second appearance when they went to the real planet and she got all her memories back and all of that. I actually thought that was the best episode of the whole show. I thought that character will be growing and becoming awesome because, she has multiple personalities, the memories of multiple life forms. She should become the most confident person ever thanks to that. She now has the life experiences of admirals and Starfleet officers and multiple other people, but suddenly now she's back to being a nervous wreck and the most shy person in the galaxy and all of that. It makes no sense. The only possible excuse for it that they could have said, and they never actually said it, is it's because Gray was removed from her. And they did kind of say that Gray used to be a very confident person and all of that, and because Gray left and is no longer part of her personality, and that's why she became less confident. And they never actually said that that's the reason. That's the only possible excuse I can try to invent to explain the change of personality. But what about all the other people that now live inside of her? Senatol and all of that. So what happened with all of their personalities? Are they not a part of you? So why are you behaving like the most shy, nervous kid ever? So I just don't get it. I don't get what they're doing with this character and why is it like that. It makes no sense unless if they said she lost her connection with the other three personalities. If they said that, I would have been fine with it, but they never explained it, so it makes no sense. And now she has the hots for Detmer for some reason, even though they never really interacted in previous episodes. I don't remember ever seeing them talking, but now she has the hots for Detmer and she comes to the bar where Morn is constantly sitting. Every single time we see this bar on the ship, we see the Ferengi bartender and the Moron type of alien. And I'm fine with referencing previous shows, all of that is nice, it's funny, but it's been done so many times now, it's like too silly. And then we have the silly scene of Michael leaning on a wall, and then the camera goes into the wall, and we see Book is on the other side of the wall, touching the wall to be close with Michael. So he's sneaking in the Jeffrey's tube of the ship, and he sneaked up to the wall next to Michael to be able to sense her. I guess he's an empath, so maybe it will make sense from his point of view, but the image of it looks really silly, like they're really close to each other without Michael knowing it. Isn't it a risk on Book's part? Because, Michael used to live with Vulcans. She had the Katra of Serek. She used to know how to do the Vulcan nerve pinch, so maybe she has some telepathic abilities and would be able to sense him suddenly, so that's quite a risk to take. So he touches the wall next to her because he still has some feelings for her, and he also is secretly in touch with that general from Earth who is on their side. She also wants to destroy the aliens and all of that because she's from that xenophobic planet Earth, that planet that used to be the center of morality in the galaxy, which is now a xenophobic evil planet, and the general wants to help Book destroy those aliens, I guess, so she's now in cahoots with him. And then Jet Reno discovers Tarka hiding in engineering, and instead of immediately calling for backup, immediately letting the bridge know, or running to get a phaser, or just clicking the comm badge to beam away, that was really obvious solution to this problem. Just beam away immediately. You have the comm badge that can snap you out of there in a second. So instead she just stands and looks at him and makes some snarky remark. I don't remember what she said. And then they just look at each other, and then it cuts to another scene. And then later when we see her again, she's been held hostage on Book's ship. When Book returns to his ship, which is still sitting on the hole cloaked, Jet Reno is behind the force field and again making what I guess is supposed to be some funny comments. I don't even remember what she said. And then Book just looks at her and stares at her, and then that's how the episode ends. And it's like, was that supposed to be funny? Was that like a punchline that was supposed to somehow be funny? That, oh, she's now being held captive on their ship, oh no. And she's totally calm about it, and Book and Tarka look shocked at the situation, and there's like a back and forth of the camera showing the expressions of each of them. I don't even know, is that supposed to be funny or tenseful or what? And that's like a cliffhanger ending. And it's like a bad comedy show, it's like a bad skit. Maybe it will work better if we add some funny music to it. I'll try to do it later on my other channel where I put all my edits. For those of you who don't know, I am actually the Major Green channel as well. So anyway, the episode ends with them finally warping toward the Tennessee hyperfield. After having this new knowledge of how they communicate using pheromones, and they have a cultural context to it, and they know that they love their children now. So now they're finally warping toward the hyperfield, which I guess will be revealed to be a giant Dyson sphere in space, so why not just call it that? I guess it's not a sphere because it looks kind of elliptical, so I guess we'll wait and see. So maybe finally they'll show us some new science fiction idea that we never saw before. I hope so. It will be such a shame if it will turn out to be an empty mystery box, that maybe that species are long gone, maybe it's just some giant AI running things. And how will they explain the timing of all of this? Because isn't it kind of strange that this whole threat from them started right after the burn was solved? Like, they just solved the burn, they figured out what caused all the dilithium to blow up, and right after that this new threat started. So if the writing would have been clever, I would have said they will probably tie it together somehow. Maybe they will reveal that maybe because of the burn, maybe that's what caused the catastrophe to the planet of these aliens. Maybe the burn reached beyond the galactic barrier and also affected them. Maybe that's what caused something to blow up in their territory and cause their extinction, and maybe they thought it's a deliberate act from inside the Milky Way galaxy, and maybe their attacks are actually in retaliation from their point of view, and so that would have been clever. It's still kind of fishy because the burn happened a century before any of these events, so why did it take them a century to retaliate? I guess maybe they first wanted to build their hyperfield and then do it, or maybe it was because of that little burn that was almost caused in the end of the previous season when they met Sukal and he got scared and he sent a little burn out. Maybe they detected it and they figured out the threat was not over, and that's what made them retaliate against the inside of the Milky Way, maybe fearing another burn and all of that. So that would be clever if they actually connect all of these dots together in a way that will make sense. Why the timing is so convenient that right when Discovery arrives in the future, that's when all of this mess happens, that without Discovery everybody would have been screwed up. And maybe they should have brought Sukal with them on the Discovery. Maybe he could have been used as a weapon against the Tennessee. That would have been clever. They have Sukal He's living with the Kelpians now, and they said that he cannot cause another burn because that can only happen on the dilithium planet. But what if they brought a bunch of dilithium with them and simply put him next to that dilithium? Wouldn't he be able to generate that dilithium blowing up wave toward the aliens? Like, wouldn't it be cool to have that kind of weapon with them just in case the negotiations wouldn't work? That could have been clever, but they didn't do it. So that's all I had to say about it for today. My next review will be about season 2 of Picard, so stay tuned for that. Let me know what you think and we can discuss all of this in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.